This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
Well, I want to thank first to AB Colombia for inviting me to this conference. What I want to present is the results of 3 projects that we had at the University of Manchester and the Open University on socio-environmental conflicts associated to extractive industries, mining, oil, natural gas, in Andean countries, mainly Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. And we didn't have study cases in Colombia specific, but we followed what was going on in the whole region. These projects had the purpose of finding the relationships between the expansion of these industries as strategies of development in the last 10-15 years and the emergence of environmental conflicts, which later on we call socio-environmental conflicts. And in that relationship, to see the role of the state, the role of the international community, NGOs, civil society, as well as of communities themselves. So we also did a general picture of what in terms of the political economy of the sector means the presence of extractive industries and the expansion that we've seen since 2002, 2003, since the crisis of the international crisis of commodities started to rise. I'm not going to repeat what Emily already presented, in the large picture of Latin America, and I'm going to focus on the Andean region. But just to highlight, some of the elements of what constitutes the political economy, the context in which mining and extractive industries more generally develop. Yes, it has been said already, the natural and biocultural wealth of these countries. The 4 countries are absolutely rich in terms of natural resources, and not only natural resources, but also in terms of cultural diversity. And that cultural diversity has to do with human diversity, ethnic and cultural. Now, what's one of the main problems of this type of wealth is that it's very unevenly distributed. And we will see that more in detail later. So there is a sort of natural unequal distribution of resources and also a population. The second element is growth, the economics of this. Growth, poverty linked to distribution, and the political stability or instability that a particular model of growth produces. And that has to do, well, it's been already said, with very high rates of growth in the last 15 years, sustained. And yes, associated to the expansion of extractive industries and to foreign direct investments. But not only. And I think that's very important to see, is that growth, which has been in an average in these countries of 4% for about 15 years, which is quite high, is being pushed in part by growth in extractive industries. But in countries like Peru and Colombia, it's been more the diversification of the economy and with important effect of the industry and manufacture that has pushed the real growth in terms not only of GDP, but in terms of employment, which is absolutely essential for reversing the resource curves in these economies. Now, again, we have to see in its broader picture, the contribution of these industries. So there is some direct contribution in terms of investments and production, but there is also an indirect contribution in terms of the linkages that it has, with other sectors in the economy. So, for example, one of the main sectors that has grown is construction. And construction is associated in a big part to infrastructure and in part to extractive industries and the linkage that it has. Now, the other element is poverty. And it's been already said, yes, poverty in Latin America and in these countries has fallen, which is a good thing. But it also has fallen in very unequal way. And that inequality, means that there is an unequal distribution that is intentional. It's not natural, but intentional. And it's inequality in terms of territories, and it's inequality in terms of groups. And yes, unfortunately, in some cases, the extractive industries have exacerbated that level of inequality. And as we will see later on, that is fueling the conflicts. So these two types of inequalities, which in terms of, if we see the territory, the Andean region, we see the superposition of mines, indigenous groups, and protected areas. This is a map of the whole region, the 4 countries. And what you have there is the red areas are indigenous territories, or territories where indigenous people live. They don't necessarily have all property rights on it, but they are present. And I want to go back to that point because it's very important. The green areas are national parks and protected areas. And all the black dots are mines in exploitation. They are not concessions, they are not exploration, but already exploration. And all this data is from the USGS, which is the Geographical Information System of the United States. And that is the way how you can see the presence of mining and the expansion of mining in the last 15 years. So, to that expansion of mining concessions and exploration sites, there has been also a revitalization of indigenous movements. And by indigenous, I don't mean only indigenous people, but also local population. And there also have been progress driven by concerns about climate change, about environmental change in general, to protect some areas. So yes, as the ambassador said, the legal framework in the Andean region has improved, and we have quite progressive laws. Different stories, the extent to which those laws are enforced, which we can come back later, because the state has a specific role. So that's the general context of mining. And within this context, what we did is to have some study cases in each country, and later on we tried to see if there are some patterns or something that we can learn from all these countries. What we found is that in general the fears, when we talk about the threat that extractive industries, mining in particular, can imply when it expands, is something that goes from here, from a landscape that looks like up to what's below. And one specific issue is water. Because water, along the watershed where mines develop, change colors. from this to this and this. I don't know if you manage all to see, but it's from very blue water to gray because of mining contamination. And of course that produces the protest of communities. They don't say no to development, but they say no to this type of growth. And in fact, we see not only controversy between what communities and what government companies want, but it's a more complex process of negotiation between what type of development each one. And it's, I say negotiation, I want to emphasize that, because as the ambassador said, yes, the paradigm is that the mining revenue is going to produce a passage from what we have on the top to what's in below. These two are two communities, again, along the same watershed. So the discourse is that local communities will change from the top to the bottom. And in the middle you have a company representative, trying to explain this to communities. That's the case in Southern Peru. So what are the critical issues that we learn in these cases? One is about the fears and expectations of people and communities. And it's a particular problem because it's very controversial within communities. So there is not a unified vision about what mining can or cannot do for their development. And communities are divided. And those divisions respond to differences in gender, differences in age, differences in their positions, political positions within the communities. Another important issue is the reputation that companies and the sector has. And here, unfortunately, mining in these countries have left enough legacies, negative legacies, that now the new companies that are entering or trying to enter in the communities have to deal with. The state's actions and inactions. There has been the search of decentralization and redistribution of monies to promote some social investments, but unfortunately, that's not happening. Local governments, regional governments are incapable of delivering the social development that they are promising. So yes, the money is there, but it's not producing the development that people expect. The mining history. Someone said before, mining is very old in Latin America and in these countries. It's been for centuries. It's true, but not fully true, because there are many, many territories in the rural areas where mining hasn't been. And so it's a shock for the communities to see what can happen in their territories if mining gets into them. Now, the reaction also is accompanied by the development alternatives. So we've seen cases, successful cases, where indigenous movements, local communities, could oppose the expansion of mining because they have an alternative called ecotourism, called ecological agriculture, called somehow some type of development, but which has lots of constraints to be successful. And then there is a specific role for governments to make possible those type of alternatives. And the last point is about economic and political and social asymmetries. Again, in a previous intervention, someone, Darío, I guess, said about the role of information. And if you see the level of access to information, but not only access, because, for example, DFID, has made a big effort for the transparency initiative. However, if we see the extent to which communities can access to that information, and if they do, to understand that type of information, it's a completely different issue. And in that specific point, we find that the international community has played, NGOs, a role, difficult, but it has played a role. So what Synquelors now is what we see as the point or the elements where a framework like the UN guidelines or the UK government's willingness to intervene in a different way in the region and these issues can help. One is, as I said, information, education, and something specific about human rights, which has to do with economic rights. And that has to do with property rights. Because, yes, in principle, indigenous territories, local communities, they own their land, but in fact they don't. Because they don't have clear property rights. Another aspect, just to finish this presentation, has to do with the land and territorial planning. There are efforts to organize land planning in the 4 countries, but again, if that's taken as a technical process, it doesn't seem that's going to be successful because there is lots to be negotiated. And again, that's the responsibility of the states and all the stakeholders to produce something that's accountable, and accountable mainly to those who need the land, the territories, to go out of poverty. So yes, we think that much can be done, much needs to be established. It cannot be generalized. And it's not the same, to talk about the oil industry, the gas industry, the mining industry, because the impacts of each one is quite different.